What's up, guys? It's the Farooqi brothers, Shiraz, Zayan, Umar, and Samir, and we're back with another big discussion. We know it's been a while since our last video, but with the coronavirus and everything that's been going on, we took a little bit of a break, but we're back, and I think we're going to be back in a big way, because we got a fun guest for you guys today, Saad Tasleem. As you guys know, the four of us brothers are Muslim, and we have done a few videos touching on our faith, but today we're going to be deep diving in a little more specifically how Muslims are perceived in the entertainment industry, the rise of Muslims in journalism, and just kind of the new world we're living in. I think Saad will bring a lot of insight that you guys will enjoy. So thank you so much, Saad, for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So let's just get right into it. And we're going to start off with Samir. Why don't you kick us off?
So my brothers and I are well aware of you and your work, but for our audience who may not be as familiar, do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. I have an interesting backstory, or origin story, as I'm sure y'all would call it. But in essence, I have studied Islam traditionally. So the traditional route that someone would go through to, become a scholar or on the path to scholarship. However, my journey towards Islamic scholarship is different because I was born, raised in America. My parents are Pakistani originally, but I don't really identify with that culture. My parents, even growing up, weren't very like when I was growing up, we didn't have much of Pakistani culture in our household. So the one culture that I identify the most with is American culture. Like, to me, it's the most familiar culture. So going through the paces and studying Islam in a traditional sense, I was able to bring the American perspective, or like the American cultural perspective, to Islam and to classical Islam as well. So my journey since then has kind of been helping young Muslims, especially, come to terms with their faith and also their American identity. There's a lot of misconceptions out there that the two can't coexist, which I have spent like years now dealing with and helping people be comfortable kind of in their skin. So comfortable with their faith, comfortable in their culture as well. So in a nutshell, like that's pretty much what I do.
You probably know that there's been a lot of pressure on young Muslims, especially in the Western world, to kind of contribute in a positive way, to kind of make their own careers, make their own lives, while also staying very much grounded in the faith. And what do you think about specifically, because I'm going to kind of just shoehorn myself in and the four of us together, journalism is something that I'm personally very passionate about. It's the career path that I chose. And Comic Book Debate is obviously an entertainment journalism website. So what do you think about kind of the growing presence of Muslims in journalism, specifically in Western media?
So I think it's great. So I was introduced to you guys actually through I know of like different comic book, like I'm a big like comic book geek and stuff like that. So that's always been part of like who I am. And I'm familiar with stuff that's out there. And then I got introduced to you guys because you're Muslim, and I was like, wait, there's Muslims like doing this work, and it really I can just say, like, for myself, like being a Muslim who's also into comic books and comic book movies and things like that, it was very comforting to know that Muslims have a voice, and that Muslims can kind of offer their perspective, because I do feel like in a lot of industries, the Muslim voice is missing. So I do look at it as a positive thing. Yeah, of course. There's going to be challenges. Of course, you're gonna come across different issues, I'm sure. Like the way it is in every single field, as a matter of fact. But overall, I do definitely think it's a positive thing, and I do think it's a step forward, especially because I speak to the younger generation, right? So the younger generation, they need to see that Islam can be practiced in the world that they're living in. So it's not just this this idea of like this utopia of what Islam, where it should be practiced or how it should be practiced, and it doesn't fit in this real world that they're living in. They need to see that Islam can be practiced in this world that we're living in. And in this world, entertainment and all that is part of this world.
Just to jump off Shiraz's point about Muslims in media, in terms of more the entertainment side, growing up here, you see all these movies and all these TV shows, and Muslims unfortunately are mostly portrayed as usually the villains or like the terrorists, and if not, they're usually given really small, insignificant roles, used mostly for comedy or comic relief. Do you think a positive change is coming soon with the rise of like Muslims in media?
I think a change is coming. I don't think it is soon enough, to be honest. It till this day, every time I see a Muslim portrayed as a terrorist, and Muslims as the enemies, it really, really bothers me, because I'm like, hey, we're living in 2020. We're supposed to be like this woke culture, and yet still, like, studios are still spending millions of dollars on these productions, and they're spent, and still they didn't have enough sensitivity to understand the implications of even one portrayal of Muslims as terrorists. Because you can do 100 movies or 100 shows or 100 comic books where Muslims are the good guys. That's not going to be as impactful as the one time somebody is portrayed as a terrorist. Well, what that does is it reinforces, confirmation bias, right? So it reinforces in people's minds the idea that, oh yeah, you know what, terrorists, most terrorists are Muslims, which is complete. Like, we know this. Like, as Muslims, we understand this. We know the facts. We know the numbers. That Muslims are by far the minority when it comes to like terrorists and terrorism. Like, even in America, we tend to think of like terrorists as the society tends to think a lot in a lot of cases that terrorists, the stereotypical idea of a terrorist is, a Muslim with a beard and so on and so forth, Middle Eastern, Arab, whatever it is. But the numbers tell us that Muslims are the way bottom on the list when it comes to terrorism in America, right? So it's honestly it's hurtful to me, because I'm in a space where I see a lot of young people who have to deal with that on a daily basis, right? So young people who are in school, dealing with their peers, and every time a movie comes out and you do see a Muslim as a terrorist or Muslims as terrorists, it does so much damage. So I do think change is coming. It's just I don't think it is fast enough.
Do you think it's more beneficial for Muslims to be behind the camera, or in directing and writing roles, or in front of the camera, or acting in lead roles?
Yeah, so I have seen. So I know a few people who went through the process, and they got into the entertainment industry, and a few of them that I know, they've been in front of the camera and not behind the camera. One of the issues that I've seen is that, and look, this is how it seems to me. I could be wrong about this, but this is my impression. My impression is that being in front of the camera, people don't have as much control and power over how they're being portrayed. Number one, when you get called in, a lot of actors are, unless you're big and famous and all that kind of stuff, especially when you're starting off, like, actors will take any role, any role whatsoever, right? Because they're just trying to get their foot in, and so it's hard. It's hard, for Muslim actors to be like, no, I don't want to play a terrorist, or I don't want to play a stereotypical, whatever, and so that lack of control is there, and second of all, you're basically fulfilling someone else's vision, right? When you're in front of the camera, somebody wrote a part and you're playing that part, and you don't have a lot of say, unless you get like super big and super famous. And once you're super big and famous, then you can kind of say, I want my character to be like this. But we're not there yet. So I'm not discouraging, people from being in front of the camera per se, but I do see it as being a lot more challenging. And also the other aspect of, I feel like oftentimes, like some of the Muslim actors that I have spoken to, I got the impression that there's a lot of pressure on them to even, sacrifice not only like the way they're portrayed is an issue, but also kind of having to sacrifice some of your own morals and beliefs and do things that they may not be comfortable with from a faith perspective. And so that pressure is there, for someone who, especially as I said, beginning, they're starting off. Behind the camera, I feel like you do have a lot more say and a lot more control over the projects. And I know, once again, once you're starting off, it may be the same problem. You're trying to get your foot in the door. You'll do anything or do things that you may not be comfortable with. But I do feel like there's still more control when you're behind the camera. We're talking about being a director, being a producer, being a writer, right? All of that stuff means you have say. You have a say in the vision. You have a say in the message. And I do believe Muslims need to be in that space so we can get representation, right? And I know other communities have done this. I know, obviously, the African American community, the Jewish community, and other minorities, they have managed to do that, right? Or at least they're in the process of doing that. And we can learn from that, definitely. Like Muslims as minorities in America, we have to learn from, our brothers and sisters who came before us, other minorities, and the challenges that they faced. And so, once we find, like now that we have, for example, take a look at the African American community. Now that you have Black directors, you have Black writers, you can see that they have more control over what's being put out there in terms of entertainment. So I think we as Muslims, like we have to do the same. So we have to that's really the space that we should focus on if we're really going to see a change in how Muslims are portrayed, and like, the image that Muslims have in the minds of, I would say, like the average American.
I mean, that's well said. I actually want to make a quick point myself. I mean, I'm a big proponent of, Muslims and any minority, honestly, to be behind the camera as much as in front of the camera for the exact same reasons you mentioned, because controlling the narrative is something that's so crucial now. And when you're in front of the camera, you're not in a position to control the narrative. You're not, in a sense, the boss of the situation. You're taking orders from someone else. And at times, that's why when Muslims do show up on screen, they're not going to be portrayed in the best way, because the people writing for these characters are not seeing it from their perspective. And I think putting Muslims in those seats, putting them in the seats of writers, of producers, of directors, that's, I think, going to be the first step to kind of bring about the wider change of people seeing on camera Muslims portrayed in a kind light. Samir has a good follow-up question that kind of touches on a project that might be the first step on that.
Yeah, so Kamala Khan, who is Miss Marvel in the Marvel comics, is getting her own TV show. So what are your thoughts on the rise of Muslim superheroes on film and TV?
Well, I think it is cool as long as it is being done by Muslims and it is authentic. And I say that not because, hey, a non-Muslim can't write a Muslim character. They can, but to really be true and authentic to the Muslim voice, you do need Muslim writers and Muslim creators to really do justice to those characters. When I think of Muslim superheroes, the one that really comes to mind is Bazz,
Simon Bazz.
Simon Bazz, the Green Lantern. And I think there's also a Batman character from Batman Incorporated in France who's Muslim. Night Runner. I don't remember the character's name itself, but I know it's Night Runner, part of the whole Batman Incorporated storyline. So that was awesome to see that. So I'd imagine for a lot of Marvel fans to see a Muslim superhero is cool, and I think it's a good start that we do. They're still, I would say they're still not in the mainstream. Hopefully, with Miss Marvel, it is a good step forward.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a positive thing. Regarding Bazz, I'm still waiting on my phone call from DC to do the voice for Simon Bazz in an animated, in an animated movie or short or something. So, that'd be great.
This idea of, we were talking before, Muslims, how they're portrayed in media, and I actually wrote a piece for the Hollywood Reporter about kind of how Muslims are portrayed in media and kind of what the discrepancies are and kind of how we can fix it. And one interesting thing is the RIS test. I don't know if you're aware of it, but
I am.
Yeah, so the RIS test, for our audience who may not be, kind of flips the switch on kind of showing how Muslims are portrayed. And in this case, if a Muslim character is talking about the victim of or the perpetrator of terrorism, the film or show in question would fail the RIS test. To, again, separate Islam and separate Muslims from terrorism, from 9/11, from tragedy, and show the brighter side, show them as what most Americans in the West are. They're just regular people, living their lives, trying to be the best people they can be every single day. And we're hoping, especially someone who's been following the superhero industry like the four of us do, that Miss Marvel at least tries to be the first step in that. On the TV side, the show will be on Disney Plus, which is kind of like a juggernaut on level with Netflix and the other people, other streaming services. So we're hoping that if anything, if it starts the chain, if it leads to DC saying after, hey, maybe a Simon Bazz TV show might work after all on HBO Max. This is the kind of stuff that we're hoping comes from that.
Yeah, look, that would be awesome. And look, I'm a Marvel, like, I hate on Marvel and stuff, but to be honest, Black Panther was awesome. Not only like as a film, or I mean, I have my critiques of the film, but it was a good film. It was a good movie, but it was awesome in what it accomplished for minorities and for like young Black kids to be able to see a Black superhero to be proud of, and that's awesome. So, if that can happen with other minorities as well, that would be really cool.
So do you think that Muslims having a presence in entertainment is helpful to creating that positive change in the mindset of non-Muslims and of people who might not have the best picture of Islam in heart?
Yeah, I do, definitely. And once again, with the caveat that as long as it's done properly. One of the issues that I've seen is that when Muslims are portrayed, and you do see Muslims in entertainment, you're talking about this whole Muslims are seen as being not fun or whatever. There's one of the trends that I've seen is that when Muslims are portrayed, they're either portrayed as being religious and therefore not fun. Or if you find a Muslim that is fun, it's because they're not religious, they don't really care about Islam, and they've kind of left that part of their identity, which is a terrible way to portray the reality of Islam for a lot, if not the majority of young Muslims that are out there. It's such a big disservice, and I think that's why we do need more Muslims who are practicing the faith to be in this space, to really show that you can be Muslim. You can not only be Muslim, okay, so yeah, you can be Muslim, but be Muslim, be a practicing Muslim, be somebody who has a strong sense of spirituality, and at the same time, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a boring person and not fun, and so on and so forth. So these are all positive steps, like I view, and it's all great, and any progress is good. But at the same time, it is important for us as Muslims and people in this space to really also, take a look at what's happening and constantly improve, improve what we're doing, and look at maybe some mistakes that we've made and constantly course correct, because we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. In your space, you guys are pioneers, which is awesome, right? But that also means that you're going to have to constantly reevaluate and look back and say, okay, we did this and this worked, and this is helpful for the Muslim community, and maybe this wasn't as helpful. So yeah, in general, yeah, I think definitely it is positive, but we do need to be a little bit careful of how Islam is portrayed.
So we've talked a little bit about the entertainment industry and entertainment journalism. I also wanted to ask, like you said, me and my brothers have been, I wouldn't say pioneers. There's other people that have done it before us, but we're trying to do something in the space. Oftentimes, what we have to deal with is, so you have like people outside of our religion. You have non-Muslims that present different problems, but we also have Muslims that present their own different challenges. And so I wanted to ask, like, what would be the best way to deal with the criticism that we would get from within our own community about being in this space? Because obviously you have different, you have a spectrum of practicing Muslims, right? You have a spectrum even within our own community. So you would have people that might look at us in this space and be like, oh, this is something that is anti Islamic or anti, different parts of what we do. So how would we address that?
So, I mean, look, first off, you guys have to come to terms with the fact that you will always be criticized. That's just part of being in the public sphere. It's part of being in the spotlight. No matter what you do, you will always be criticized, and that's just something I came to terms with that a long time ago. And I sometimes have to remind myself of it, but that's just the reality of the world that we're living in. You can go ultra conservative, and then people will criticize you. You can go ultra liberal, and then people will criticize you from the other end. And you can be like, no, we want to be balanced, and then you'll find criticism from here and from there. That's just the nature. That's just that's part of the job, right? So that's number one. So the criticism is always going to be there. How do you deal with criticism on a personal level, from a spiritual standpoint? You really have to ask yourself if you're being true to who you are and what you believe is right, and that is where you find peace, right? So criticism, it's going to be there, and that's fine. Everyone has the right to criticize you and criticize whoever, and that's fine. But from a personal standpoint, and this is the way I look at it, right? When somebody criticizes me for one thing or the other, and I get the same thing. For some people, I'm too liberal. For some people, I'm too conservative. For some people, I'm too much this and too much that, and that's just. And so I don't always say like I'm not listening to you. I will listen to people sometimes, and then be introspective and say, okay, is that a valid criticism? Am I not being true to myself? Am I not being true to what I hold to be correct? Am I not being true to my morals? That's where it becomes personal for you, and that is also a way for you to find peace with yourself. If you're evaluating yourself and you say, look, I believe what I'm doing is true to what I view as being upright and moral and good. And I view it as being true to who I am as a person, and as I said, my beliefs. Then it'll be a lot easier to put that criticism aside, and it'll be easier for you to also look at that criticism and say, okay, that was helpful, and maybe I can, like, some criticism is valid, right? And so to look at some criticism and say, yeah, maybe I did go too far in this one area, or whatever the criticism may be. And criticism, on the other, so there's part of criticism that is also important as well, because if no one were allowed to criticize us, then that means we think we are 100% right 100% of the time, which is impossible, because we're human beings. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. We all have lapses in judgment. So we shouldn't look at all criticism as being completely bad. But on the other stand, on the same hand, like same token, we have to understand that there are some people who criticize you just for criticizing you. So it's not. I wish I had an easy answer for you that you just do this and everything will be fine, but that's not how this stuff works. It is going to be a struggle, and one of my teachers would say to me that if you find people criticizing you, then know that you are doing something you're doing something impactful. Like it's having an impact. The question you have to ask yourself is, am I having the correct impact or not? So that's kind of, and I think it's the same for me and the same for, you all as well in the space that you guys are in.
And well said. Again, I think we really appreciate this because not only is it helpful for our audience, it's selfishly helpful for the four of us as well because we're taking everything to heart. And again, the main thing that I think is worth saying is that we definitely don't want to kind of grandstand we're four Muslim guys and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I think at the heart of it, when we started Comic Book Debate, when we started this podcast, when we started this YouTube channel, was the idea that we're just four guys where we grew up together. We love, naturally, just like you, we love superheroes. We love comic books, like as any kid would growing up here. And we just want to share our opinions and see what happens. And then eventually that ended up organically growing. And now we have a sizable audience. So like you said, there's going to be criticisms from all sides. And you got to take it with, a few grains of humbleness, but also with a few grains of salt and kind of make a balance, understand what criticism is, where it's coming from, what the intention of it is, and then always, like you said again, which is great advice, like you have to make every day to strive to improve yourself and always make that evaluation and self-correct and improve and don't get complacent at one juncture.
No problem. Like I said, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to talk comic books or comic book movies.
So with that said, I think we can move into the fun stuff and get into comic book movies. Zion, why don't you jump in?
So you mentioned that you're a huge DC fan, and let's just dive deep into that. When did you first get introduced to the whole superhero space genre? Was it a specific show or film, or like what made you a superhero fan?
So honestly, my older brother, he's about 7 years older than me, and so a lot of like pop culture and stuff I took from him because I would look up to him and he would be exposed to stuff way before me. So the first thing that I was exposed through my brother was the first Batman live action movie, Batman '89, the Tim Burton Batman. And I was very little, I was very young at that time, but that's my first superhero, my first exposure to superheroes. And that's why, because it was like my first one, I've always just loved Batman, throughout, my life, because when I think superheroes, I think Batman. Like for me, that's the quintessential superhero. And I know for a lot of people, especially DC fans, it's Superman because he's like the first superhero. And don't get me wrong, Superman's cool, but no superhero is as cool as Batman. But that's where my journey began with superheroes and comic books and all that.
What would you say? Do you have like a ranking of your favorite Batman films, or like what would you say is your top 3 personal favorite Batman films?
Man, that is a hard question to answer because I like different Batman films for different reasons. But if like I really had to pick like a top 3, like overall taking everything into consideration. And look, before I say this, I know it's going to be controversial, but this is my view on the issue. So for me, like anything where Batman is part of the movie counts. And I say that because number 1 for me would be Batman vs Superman. Number 2 would be Dark Knight, and number 3 would be Batman '89. That would probably be my top 3.
That's awesome.
Actually, one more quick follow-up. Well, how do you rank your 3 favorite Batmen then? Instead of bad movies, what are your 3 favorite Batmen?
Okay. So look, I'm proud of this. Number 1 for me would be Batfleck. Ben Affleck's Batman for me did the best job. I've always had issues with all of the Batman in the live action adaptations of these films. Certain parts of them worked, certain parts of them didn't work. Even Christian Bale, who for a lot of people that's like blasphemy if you don't completely adore Christian Bale's Batman. But I had I don't know, I enjoyed aspects of his Batman. I think it worked really well. Aspects of it I didn't really like. For some reason I never saw him as Bruce Wayne, properly. In my mind, he's not Bruce. I don't know. Something about him didn't fully work for me. And also the fact that there's aspects of the character that I didn't find in Christian Bale's Batman. For example, Batman being, the smartest guy in the world. The fact that the Joker in The Dark Knight was constantly 10 steps ahead of him. And even by the end of the film, if you one way of looking at it is that, the Joker actually won and Batman failed. So, as amazing as the Joker was, I think, it came a little bit at the expense of Batman. Because I feel like Batman was always, and I felt like he was whining and crying a lot in that movie. I don't know. And the trilogy as a whole, I don't know. On the other hand, if you look at Batman vs Superman, which for me is the only movie where we got to see Ben Affleck's Batman. I don't count Justice League. At least the cut that we got. I don't consider that to be. I'll put that aside. That's not the movie that we were supposed to get. So the theatrical release. Well, once the Zack Snyder cut comes out, then okay, we can bring that into the picture, into the discussion. But Batman Superman, starting with the look, Ben Affleck, I think, nailed the look when it came to Bruce Wayne. He looked like Bruce Wayne. He embodied, I don't know, he just, everything, that scene where he comes up, or comes down the elevator and he goes into the Bat Cave, and that's all, that's Bruce Wayne. That's 100% Bruce Wayne. And then him as Batman, I think is the best bat suit on screen. I don't know. For me, that was the best on-screen Batman. Everything about that Batman worked. And I know some people have, issues with, the type of Batman that was portrayed, with him killing and, certain things that he did, which were jarring. I'm not gonna lie to you. Some of the stuff that I saw, my first initial gut reaction to some of that stuff was jarring. So I remember seeing Batman drink, right? And I was like, wait, Batman's drinking? What's going on? Batman's supposed to be, he doesn't drink. He's sharp. He's always, seeing him kind of the fascist Batman, right? The absolutist. I was like, whoa, why would Batman ever say that? When he goes, even if there's a 1% chance that Superman, whatever that line is, I'm like, whoa, right? But then once you understand the type of Batman that Zack Snyder was going for, you understand that basically he's broken down. And he is not, and the whole point of that movie, which a lot of people didn't catch, was that you're not supposed to recognize as Batman, because this is not the traditional Batman. He's straight away, and he's become bitter. He's broken. He's not the Batman that we know. And so once you understand that, it automatically, that portrayal of Batman for me becomes amazing. So yeah, that's my number one. I don't know, number 2, 3. I don't know. I guess 2 would have to be Christian Bale. 3, I don't know. I guess Keaton, because that's a lot of that portrayal of Batman is nostalgia for me. So that definitely gets nostalgia points. So those are my top 3.
Nice.
What do you think about Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves taking on the reins for the next Batman movie?
So look, I firmly believe in giving people a chance. Just like everybody was wrong about Heath Ledger's Joker. I don't know if you guys remember this. I don't know if you're maybe too young for this, but there was all this noise on the internet and people getting really upset about casting Heath Ledger as the Joker, and it's all these issues or whatever. And then everybody, you won't find anybody who's like, I didn't really like that Joker, or he didn't do a good job, right? Everybody's on board once we saw it being done. So I firmly believe that we got to give people a chance. As crazy as it sounds, and look, same thing with Ben Affleck. People are like, Ben Affleck as Batman, that's ridiculous. And people, we forget this, especially people, those of us who are like fans of Ben Affleck's Batman. It was strange when he was cast initially. You're like, wait, like him, doesn't make sense. You already played Daredevil, and that didn't turn out too great. And so when I heard Robert Pattinson, I was like, okay, yeah, it's maybe I wouldn't have cast him. It's not the first person, maybe not even like the 10th person that comes to mind when I think of Batman, but I'm going to give it a chance, especially because we don't really know exactly what the director, what's his name, Matt Reeves, right? Matt Reeves? Yeah, Matt Reeves. We don't know like the vision, like what Batman he's going for and what the true, like what is that film going to be? It's very likely that for the film that they're going for, that is the best casting choice, right? So I'm optimistic about that casting of Batman.
How do you feel about the look, though? Do you think you pull it off?
So there's a lot that I like about it, and I'm one of those people. Once again, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt until like the movie comes out and I can fully see what it is. So once again, in that world, and what we're hearing about, and I don't know if this is just rumors, you guys probably know much better than I do, that, this is supposed to be early Batman, he's just started off maybe the first few years, and, that's why everything seems to have like a handmade feel, and it's kind of like rough, it's cobbled together, and so that, thinking of it from that point of view, like that aesthetic, I'm totally digging it. If this is Batman just like, putting things together, the Batmobile, a lot of people didn't like it. I loved it because I'm like, yeah, this is something you would put together in your garage. There's like a muscle car Batmobile. It's not pretty, but it's like, it's menacing, and I'm sure it's loud. It's got that, just like his suit, it's got that feel, that really like low tech, high tech kind of feel, it's like, I don't know. For me, it worked. It totally worked. In that world, I'm totally cool with it. Let me ask you guys about this. All right. So, well, one of the things that I've noticed is that with comic book movies and comics films, and I would say, I guess this is more DC than Marvel, but with DC specifically, and other properties as well, Marvel excluded, but people have a certain vision, a certain idea of what this character is supposed to be. And when they see something that doesn't fit their idea of what that character is supposed to be, people have a negative reaction to it, right? So people are like, my Batman is supposed to be like this, or, my Superman is supposed to be like this. And that doesn't work for me because that's not what I had in my head, right? And so there's like an adverse reaction to it. Do you guys think that's true? Do you guys think that's one of the factors?
I mean, I think 100%. I mean, this is coming from me. I know we had a lot of Batman fanboy discussions, but I'm a Superman fanboy, so I've lived in this world where Superman is very much, you'll be surprised how people are so possessive of this character, specifically to make him his own.
Possessive. I guess that's the word, yeah. Possessive.
So everyone wants their version to be the definitive, and nothing else matters except the one that you grew up with or the one that you love the most. So in this case, Christopher Reeve's Superman just became the gold standard, the icon. I mean, when you got to this current social media age where everyone has an opinion and everyone can shout on the rooftops, it becomes a lot more toxic, and that's what we're seeing now.
So this is what I've noticed with Marvel, right? And I'm sorry to keep bringing Marvel, but Marvel totally gets a pass on this, right? So they can do Marvel can do whatever they want to like their characters, like completely different, costumes and this they could change the whole backstory, whatever. And Marvel fans are like, it's all good, right? Everything gets a pass. But DC characters, people, they change something and like people lose their minds, right? But at the same time, I do think there's positive in that, and what it shows me is that DC characters are a little bit more part of our culture than Marvel characters, right? And that's why people are maybe more passionate about DC characters.
I think Marvel, because DC is so much bigger in pop culture, Superman and Batman, like you said, like they transcend the comic book genre. They're literally kind of like the modern, what we call modern mythology. Like they're the mythology of today's era, you know. So they have like this kind of again transcendence with audiences where you just know the character and you get obviously possessive about it. Whereas Marvel, they're a little late to the game.
Really, aside from Spider-Man,
outside of Spider-Man, yeah, they're late to the game. So they're creating their mythology right now as we speak. I think we're gonna give the floor to you one last time, Saad. Just tell us what you have coming up. Any new Al Maghrib courses you're excited to teach? Any new projects? What do you have going on the side with the clothing line? Just the floor is yours.
Yeah. So at the moment, as y'all know, because of the coronavirus, pretty much. Look, so you guys know this, but for your audience, I basically travel for work. So I travel around North America, travel Europe, travel across the world, as an educator, as a teacher. And so all of that came to halt, because of the coronavirus. So a lot of plans that I did have, they are at a standstill right now. So kind of reevaluating right now the best way to continue doing what I'm doing in the current climate. But yeah, I do, in the past I have created seminars and courses, and these are all geared mostly towards, Muslims, and a lot of my audience is a younger Muslim audience. And the last seminar that I taught dealt with culture and identity. But I do want to continue in that same line of work. And so I do have a couple of things under development right now. Apart from that, you guys may know this, but I have a clothing line as well, the Saad Tasleem collection. And that is very dear to me because before I went and studied Islam on an academic level, I'm a designer by profession. So that, I've always had a creative itch, and for me, my clothing line allows me to deal with my creative needs. So we had, basically our model is we drop, all our stuff is limited in quantity. It's very exclusive. And so we drop like 1 or 2 pieces at a time. We were supposed to have a piece that was supposed to come out, but production got halted because of the coronavirus. But we have a few pieces now lined up that should be dropping. So I'm very excited for that as well. But yeah, so if anybody wants to follow me on my social media, that's where, you can be updated about all the projects that I have coming up.
And we're going to be putting all of his links, social media, all in the description, so you guys can definitely check it out for yourself. We highly recommend it, even if you're Muslim, non-Muslim. It's interesting stuff, worth checking out for sure. And just before we wrap up, I want to quickly kind of bump out the charity that we want to kind of focus on today. We're doing, we kind of want to push our followers because of the coronavirus, because, all of us are in this new reality now, a new world. Everyone's making adjustments to their lives, but there's a lot of people who do not have the privilege to make those adjustments or are in need for help. So we want to just shout out, Islamic Relief USA. We're going to have the link to the donation also in the description box below. They provide relief, especially for pandemics, disaster situations like this one, between development work, aid, water, food, shelter, healthcare, and education. They're supporting the children, supporting the orphans. It's good stuff. If you have a few dollars to spare, whatever you have, might as well give it to charity. It's going to a good cause. So all that link will be in the description. We really appreciate it if you check it out. So that's pretty much it, guys. We definitely want you to sound off in the comments to what we're saying, everything that's going on. Saad, I want to definitely thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been fun. Anytime someone says come talk comic book movies, I'm down. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So the door from myself, from Zayan, from Umar, from Samir, and from Saad Tasleem. This is the Farooqi Bros. We'll see you next time. Peace out.